Criticised, quite rightly I reckon, Sydney Teals, Kylea, Tink and Sophie Scamps for joining forces with the Greens to accuse Israel of war crimes 9 days after the terrorist organisation Hamas slaughtered over 1,400 innocent Israelis. The two MPs sought to condemn Israel for war crimes. They've called for an immediate ceasefire. They also sought to erase a statement that said Australia stands with Israel and recognises its inherent right to defend itself. They're in response, the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies condemned the MPs, said their position was completely indefensible and morally reprehensible. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry accused them of having a moral fog that insulted Jewish people. Today, Monique Ryan, though, Allegra Spender and Zoe Daniel, they've all distanced themselves from their fellow Teals. And this followed a statement from Scamps, which looks like she's trying to walk it all back from yesterday's shameful move. Too late, I reckon. Joining me now to get his thoughts on all of this, Alex Ryvchin, the CEO or co-CEO, the Australian Council of Australian Jewry. Alex, thank you again for your time. I sort of expected this rot from the Greens, you know, anti-Israel, a whole lot of ignorance. But geez, I was surprised to see that two Teal MPs joined in. What was your reaction?
Well, I was as surprised as you, but, you know, we found it quite appalling, as we made clear in a letter to the two Teals that we sent earlier today. It's not difficult to do the right thing in these circumstances. It's not difficult to look at the slaughter of 1,400 people in their homes, at 250 young people massacred at a rave, to look at scenes of babies slain in their cribs, of people dragged off to captivity. 200 people, 200 Israeli civilians remain in captivity by the sadists and barbarians that Hamas are in Gaza at the moment. It's not difficult to look at that and just to simply condemn it. But these Teals, unfortunately, felt compelled to engage in these moral equivalences, these false equivalences, and side with the Greens. And as you said, they both issued statements this morning which whitewashed the fact that they stood with the Greens temporarily, and only highlighted the fact that they ended up voting in favour of the resolution. But their conduct has been noted and it won't be forgotten.
Yeah, I'm interested in that won't be forgotten bit, because we know a lot of these Teal seats have significant populations of Jewish Australians. What sort of reaction in those communities have come from this pretty shameful behaviour?
Well, I know that the members of the Jewish community in those seats are absolutely appalled and outraged, and many of them have contacted their MPs to let them know exactly how they feel, how let down they feel. But I don't think it'll just be the Jewish community that has its say on this issue at the next election. I think all Australians, all voters look to integrity and principle and look to see how their MPs act in these defining moments. And the fact that they acted so shockingly showed such a moral lapse in a critical time, in a time when the Jewish people are hurting, when Western civilization has taken such a blow. I think that they'll be punished at the polls next time.
Look, you are right to remind us it's not just the Jewish community that's disgusted by these sorts of comments from the two women that we saw yesterday, and the attempt to wind it back today, which is, I just think is incredible. I've got to ask you too about comments. They came in late this afternoon. Labor Senator Fatima Payman, she condemned Israel for its response to the Hamas terror attacks. Watch this.
The killing of innocent civilians in Israel should be condemned, and we condemn it. The killing of innocent civilians in Palestine should also be condemned, and we must condemn it. The price tag of Israel's right to defend itself cannot be the destruction of Palestine. Israel's right to defend its civilians cannot equate to the annihilation of Palestinian civilians. I hereby call for an immediate ceasefire to come into effect.
I mean, how does Israel, if you follow her logic, fight back against terrorists with one arm tied behind their back?
Well, there are those who want us to very quickly forget the scenes of a week ago, those horrors, and to forget that 200 Israeli citizens remain in captivity. And they want to draw us into these arguments about root causes and false equivalences and both sides and this sort of nonsense. But all decent people will recall what happened, the atrocities that occurred. We certainly will never forget them. And the fact that what Israel now does, it's not about harming Palestinian civilians. No one is interested in doing that. That's where Israel is different to Hamas. It's about returning the captives to freedom. It's about eradicating Hamas entirely and ensuring that in future they can never do this sort of thing again. So these sorts of arguments about both sides and protecting civilian life, both in Israel and the Palestinian territories, they miss the mark completely.
What about this line that you can be anti-Israel, but that doesn't make you anti-Semitic? Because I've seen that line crossed repeatedly in recent days.
One can certainly criticise Israeli politicians and aspects of Israeli policy, and no decent person, no reasonable person would consider that to be anti-Semitic. No one has ever made that argument. But what we've seen in the last few weeks is individuals who claim to be pro-Palestinian or critical of Israel really reveal themselves for having a very deep-seated hatred of the state of Israel, hitting at it in its darkest, most traumatic period of time, attempting to draw equivalences between the state of Israel and the terrorists that it needs to fight. So I think there's a very clear distinction between reasonable objections to matters of policy and something far more deep-seated and something far more elemental, which is often a contempt for the Jewish people expressed as a criticism of Israel.
And the right to Israel existing at all. Alex Ryvchin, thank you for your time.